Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So today is going to be a little bit different because I've never taught an ethics class online. I find it to be a little bit different than teaching most classes because most of the time when I teach ethics, I'm going to be asking several questions, and in my notes are several questions, and obviously I can't ask all any of the questions. So again, it'll just be a little bit different for me. So normally I would start this by asking kind of the opening question, and that's why do y'all think that the book is named A Gift of Fire? And the reason is because technology parallels fire quite a bit. If you think about fire, it has drastically changed our civilization. It is the reason why civilization exists in the way that it currently does exist. So we know that fire, if we take a look at it, it heats our homes, it is increased industry, just lots of advancements, in our society. And we use fire every single day in our civilization. But we also know fire has a very devastating side. And if you take a look at it, I mean, it's burned down San Francisco in the past. But one of the things that we don't often think about, and I think this is one of the major things that really changed our civilization, when it comes to fire, is that before fire, that we were like a hunter-gatherer society. So we would just kind of follow the herds, all the animals that we need to eat. We'd have to follow those. But with fire came the ability to cook grains. And when you cook grains, that allows us to release the nutrients. So with that ability, we were able to switch from a hunter-gatherer society into an agricultural based society. So again, you can see that, that's huge, that it's major advancements. It's all good, but we look at the bad. I told you about the burning down of San Francisco. We look at California and we can see that that all the forest fires that take place, just the destructive nature of fire. And if we take a look at that and we try to kind of weigh that on a scale, does it outweigh? Does the bad of fire outweigh the good of fire? And if we think about it, it really doesn't matter if it outweighs it, because it has improved the way that the way we live so much that even if we wanted to ban it, if we wanted to get rid of it, we couldn't do it. We need it to survive. So that's going to be the kind of the theme, the overarching theme this whole entire semester, that we're going to take a look at a lot of this technology, and we're going to try to compare and contrast it and see what's good and what's bad. And oftentimes, even if the bad in the technology may even outweigh the good, that it really doesn't matter because we need it to survive now. And there is no way, even if we wanted to ban it, that we could ban it. Now, of course, that's not all technology. That's just kind of the general view that we're going to be taking here. One of the things I want to point out, again, when we're reading these chapters, what we want to do is we want to kind of pick out a technology when we come across it. And in the back of our minds, we're going to be thinking of kind of the pros and cons. We're going to be contrasting this whole entire semester. So try to think of the pros of that technology, the cons of it. Try to think that how would that pro maybe benefit this group, and maybe see how would it would be a negative to another group, and how sometimes even a positive, we see it, that it could be a positive for one group could actually be a negative for another. So we just kind of want to develop that mindset as we go through the semester, and just keep that in mind here. I lost my train of thought here. Also note that I am recording this at my house, and so I'm going to have distractions like I currently have right now. And we'll just have to kind of bear through that. So just note, I may wind up having to pause the video or something because I've got all of my kids here in the house with me at this moment. So an overview of how this semester is going to work. I know we've talked about it, but I just want to mention it one more time. So you should have read chapter 1 for this one, for this lecture. So we are going to have kind of one lecture over one chapter in the book. So there will be 9 lecture chapters throughout this semester, and you should have read the chapter before that lecture. And then I'm going to release online, and let's see, I think I have it pulled up here. If we take a look right here. So now you should be able to go into your online classroom, and you will see there's a new entry called chapter notes. So if you click on that, and we are in chapter 1, And you can see here's actually the PDF for chapter 1, so that you can kind of print off or just open it up and look through those slides that I'll be using. And then I have the additional content, one that we'll be using this during class, but the articles that you need to read before the next one, because the next class meeting is going to be our group day, which is going to cover chapter 1. And then it's also going to cover the positive of deep fakes. That's an article, this TED Talk here, and also this social media article, the pros and cons of social media there. So you need to have watched and read all of that material, because we're going to be giving you prompts in class as we break you up in groups, and then you will each have a question from one of these 4 places right here. All right. And then, of course, so that's kind of our discussion day. Then we also have kind of these technical days where it's going to be covering like resume writing, cover letters, things like that. And then at the end of those, we will also be having a quiz over our interview questions. But again, I'll explain a little bit more on each one of those days so you can kind of get a better understanding of that. All right. All right, so as you can see, this book has themes. Themes are kind of important in this class, and make sure that you understand. Of course, this one is the pace of change right here. And then we go into change and unexpected developments of technology. And then we actually have kind of a breakdown of a few themes right here, smaller themes within this chapter. And then lastly, we'll cover ethics right here. So when we start talking about the pace of change, we're talking about how technology has actually increased over the years. So if you kind of look at the slide here, in 1940s, that's when the first computer was built. And one of the things that jumps out to me in my lifetime is I remember the 3.5-inch floppy disk. I don't know if y'all remember those, but those floppy disks held 161.2 kilobytes on its storage there. And then think about your phones today when you take a picture, and how many of those photos would actually fit onto that 3.5-inch floppy disk. And the answer is not even one. So not even one would fit onto that storage medium. And then I also think about when I was born in 1982, because in 1983, the largest hard drive only held 10 megabytes of data. So you can see like the jumps that we have taken in my lifetime. It's quite remarkable. If we look at all the data types right here, it started with a bit, then it went to a nibble, a byte, a kilobyte, a megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte. Now we have petabyte, we have exabyte, zettabyte, and yottabyte. And no, that's not like Yoda from Star Wars, but it's Yotta, so Y-O-T-T-A there. So make sure you don't say Yoda when you mention that one. And then also think about Google. Google, it kind of blows my mind. Do you know that they have so much data on you that they don't even know what to do with that data? That's how vast it is. Why do they keep that data? Well, that's because they might actually need it in the future. They don't know. So they just go ahead and keep all that data. And then, of course, our newest technology here that we've kind of reached is AI, right? AI and really quantum computing is a new one that we're entering in as well. So when it comes to AI, one of the things that I kind of want to make clear on here, normally I would ask y'all what y'all think my viewpoint would be, but I'll just go ahead and state it here. So with AI, when it comes to like writing papers or your resumes or cover letters, I actually don't mind y'all using that stuff. I think it is a tool that you're going to use in industry. So I think it is a tool that should be available for you in this class. Now, here is the rule with that though. So if you were just to tell some AI prompt to write you a paper on some technology and then try to turn it into me, no, that's not going to work. Oftentimes, we can kind of catch that stuff. So what you should do is when it comes to AI and writing papers or generating material, I want y'all to use that as a rough draft. It's a great tool to kind of get you started, because that's one of the hardest parts, is just getting things going. So yes, go ahead and use AI on your paper and kind of get a jump start on it. But then you need to go back and really make that paper yours. You need to reword it and add your words to that, and pull in some other resources there. So it just doesn't need to be, spit out right from the whatever AI that you're using there. And it's the same with industry. When it comes to your resume, a lot of people are are enjoying using like an AI to generate a resume. Well, you take these large companies where someone from the HR department is processing thousands of resumes, and they have the ability to spot somebody that just had an AI generate them a bland, resume. And what do you think they're going to do with that? I've talked with these people. They can spot them, and when they see that, one of the first things they do, they just move it on to a different pile and ignore that one. So again, you need to personalize everything that you use with that, but go ahead and use it as a starting foundation. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, so the book kind of moves on to cell phones, social media, collaboration, and e-commerce. And again, I'm covering an entire chapter per class period. There's no way I can get to all this material. So what I'm going to be doing when I teach these lectures is I'm just going to be highlighting some information through it. So again, there's no way we can get through it all right here, but it's going to be your job to obviously go back, or not go back, but to read this stuff ahead of time. But when I am talking about things, you should try to make a note of that, because what I'm trying to do is highlight some information that I might have found to be important. So obviously that could be on some test material right there. So if you aren't familiar with it, you might need to go back and read it a little bit more. But again, I'm just highlighting this information. So when it comes to cell phones, I think sometimes here in America, we don't understand of how it truly revolutionized things. If you take some of the other countries, especially your poor countries where people don't own computers, you can kind of take, for an example, a farmer. Well, back before the internet was just wirelessly everywhere, and then your cell phone is able to access that. When it comes to a farmer's crop, they would basically have one person, could be more, but just a handful of people that they would go to that would sell that crop to. And of course, the price was basically whatever the person that was purchasing that grain was willing to pay for it. So you were at their mercy the entire time. But with the introduction of the internet and with cell phones, more people are able to have those cell phones than were computers. This was another fun fact that I actually found out, that more people have access to cell phones than toilets around the world. I know that has nothing to do with the class, but I find it as a fun fact there. But anyway, since the introduction of that cell phone, that people are able to actually check on the internet the price of the grain, so they can maybe find some people that are further out and justify or see if it would be willing to drive a little bit further to sell the grain. So what they were able to do, they were able to create competition. And so now those people that are purchasing the grain, they are competing against one another for the prices that they are going to be purchasing that grain for. So what do you think about cell phones here? So, I mean, obviously I showed you some good right there. There's lots of good that comes from cell phones, but there's also lots of bad. We know that cell phones are addicting. They take a lot of our time, that is for sure. But in the grand scheme of thing, if we, kind of going back to that same thing, it's could we ban it if the bad outweighs the good? And the answer again would be no, we can't ban it. They've become so ingrained in kind of how we live our lives. I mean, I know I bank on it, I invest on it. There's all the e-commerce, there's communication, navigation. Most of us don't even own a map in our car anymore, because we just use the map app on our phone to get around. I know that my school has an app for all of my kids, and that keeps me in constant kind of connected to my kids with everything that goes on there. I know it. They communicate back and forth with me through those apps. I remember when I was a kid that at the top of my closet, we had encyclopedias up there. And I remember people coming over even to use some of those encyclopedias. And now nobody hardly even owns an encyclopedia, because we all have it right here on our phones. We can just Google it on the internet. So again, even if we disagree with cell phones, there's really no way that we could actually ban them. Now, should I delete a lot of the apps on my phone that take a lot of my time, like the little silly games that are on it? Yes, I probably should do that. All right. I don't think there's anything from here. Moving on to social networking here. So oftentimes I will pick on Zuckerberg in this class. So just note that it's not, when I mention Facebook or Zuckerberg, it's not really him particular I'm picking on. It's or I'm talking about, it's social media in general. But since we are talking about Zuckerberg, I normally ask y'all, do y'all know how he got his, I guess, his empire started? And that was at Harvard. He invented a hot or not website that basically objectified people. But he believed in equal opportunity. So he did objectify both men and women, where you could get on there and rape people. Of course, Harvard shut that down pretty quickly. And then he invented the directory structure that later became Facebook. And social media is a fascinating topic. We'll be talking about it quite a bit throughout this semester. Actually, one of the articles I just showed you earlier is going to be over social media. So we're not going to really dive in depth here. Again, this first lecture is just kind of like glancing over some of the topics that we'll be covering this semester. And so social media is definitely going to play a big part in that. Also note that kind of talking about the ethical issues of social media, one of the kind of the things I like to highlight is in 2016, Russia actually used the Facebook to make posts and stuff. And of course, that was actually some election interference type stuff. So it was a misinformation campaign. And what was interesting, it wasn't like they really targeted a specific candidate in that. That wasn't their true goal. Their true goal was if they kind of posted stuff from the left point of view about the right, and then they posted stuff from the right point of view about the left. So it was mainly just to get each other, to divide our country. So kind of undermining the democracy and stuff. They just wanted our country to be mad at each other and constantly infighting about it. So then we talk about, so that was, a corporation, it was Facebook. And then we wonder, was that ethical of Facebook? But a more important question to that is, does corporations even have ethics here? Well, if we take a look at a corporation, the actual ethical imperative of a company is to make money. Then we need to look at, okay, well, do individuals within Facebook have ethics? And the answer to that is also yes. So you see how this is kind of tricky because as a corporation, the ethical imperative is to make money for its shareholders, but then you also have individuals within that company that are working that they are bound definitely by ethics. So you're going to have this kind of dilemma that goes back and forth, and we're going to kind of figure out how we're going to navigate that in the future here. Okay, skipping through some of this here. Oh, e-commerce. E-commerce jumps out with me on this one because I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but I do remember it. Before 1992, that it was illegal to have e-commerce on the internet. So you couldn't purchase things on the internet. And you can see Amazon here opening up in 1994 with its selling books online. And of course, that was after 92, where before then it was illegal. And I just, can you imagine what it's like could you imagine what it's like if we didn't have that ability to sell things on the internet, to have e-commerce? It would drastically change everything for us. So here on this next part, this is just with some of the topics we'll be covering, like telemedicine, autonomous cars, robots, smart sensors, motion the control, tools for disabled people. These are all things that, technology has made vast improvements in the way that we live our lives. I actually saw one example online not too long ago, and it was a lady that had a disability. I can't remember what the disability was called, but she was unable to speak at all. And I believe she was paralyzed except for her eyes. And so she had a camera that would look at her eyes, and then she would move her eyes looking at like a letter chart. So a conversation between her and her husband would often have like a 5-minute delay for her to be able to basically type everything out. And then a machine would then read what she actually, typed out there. Well, this new tool had an implant into the brain, and they sat there and they trained, basically had certain words they would tell her to think about, and this software would monitor her thoughts on this to eventually it learned that kind of, okay, this thought meant this word, so it able to map it out. And then they were able to have a conversation with more of like a 20 to 30-second delay. And they had a computer screen there that kind of had a virtual avatar, like a representation of what that lady looked like. And then it would speak as she thought out the words on there. So again, technology that's way out there and drastically changing our lives for the better. So here is a section you want to pay attention to. These are definitely good test questions. And these are these kind of smaller themes that the book has: old problems in a new context, adapting to new technology, varied sources of solutions to problems, global reach of the net. I think there's a couple of more. So you want to understand kind of what those themes are, understand the overall, what they're trying to tell you there. But one thing I really want to point out, and I believe that is on page 28, and that is the varied sources of solutions to problems. So I think on this next slide here, we have those broken down. So this is going to be like a blueprint that we're going to be used to guide our answers throughout this semester. So those varied sources to solutions are going to be technical solutions, market mechanisms, education, public awareness, and then legal solutions. And then also note that the book kind of talks about these throughout the whole, and I mean, it's in the whole entire book here, but they often call them responses. So I don't want to get y'all confused because it seems to be pretty confusing. And I agree, it is a little bit the way they say them responses, but you can think of responses as solutions. So if there is a problem, and then the book may say, but we could use a technical response. So that is coming up with some technical solution to the problem. So on your exam, if I tell y'all, what is a technical response to this problem, then you need to think of, okay, what is some technology, some use of technology that I could actually fix this problem with? So if we take a look at it, technical solutions, so it includes hardware and software. So an example of that would be maybe an improved lighting near ATMs to kind of deter robbers. If we look at market mechanisms, so that's competition and consumer demand. So you could think of, let's see, maybe a user authentication technology that's implemented at financial institutions to combat online identity theft. Let's see, education and awareness. This one's pretty self-explanatory, just increasing awareness about potential risks. So it's just educating individuals about maybe a best practice of how to use some technology. Then we have legal solutions. So that encompasses legal frameworks, law enforcement strategies, and regulatory measures there. So it could be maybe penalties that were created for online fraud. That would be a legal solution to a problem there. So make sure you review these, come back to it, obviously read in the book. This isn't technically from the book. I'm kind of just giving you some examples to kind of help you out right there. And then, of course, some of those other themes is going to be the trade-offs and controversies. Perfection is a direction, and there's a difference between personal choices, business policies, and law. So those are all themes that make really good test questions for that first exam there. All right, so now we've hit ethics here. And this is a funny one here because ethics, this is something that philosophers have been pondering for thousands and thousands of years here. And I think we're going to try to glance over this in maybe 5 or 10 minutes here to finish up. And that's going to be our coverage of ethics. But you can also kind of see in the book how the book, it only devotes, I don't know, it's maybe around 20 pages or something to ethics. And this is a class on ethics. So what I want to point out is we're going to be doing exactly what the book does here. It doesn't have an in-depth coverage really of all the ethical philosophies or anything that's out there. What it does is we glance over ethics, we get a general understanding about them, and then we're going to really learn ethics or how to be ethical in this class by example scenarios. So in this book, you're just going to be bombarded through every single chapter, kind of looking at a scenario and then seeing how they handled it, or maybe how they didn't handle it and should handle it, and then maybe the repercussions of they didn't handle this well, and here's what happened to them. So seeing kind of the consequences of their actions when they weren't ethical. So if we take a look, the book asks, what is ethics? Well, in general, very, very basic, it's what it means to do the right thing. Of course, it makes some assumptions, and that is that people are rational and make free choices. Another thing we need to consider is people are also emotional and they make mistakes. So keep that in mind, is, we're not always at our best when we make these. So we don't always make those rational decisions, but we keep those assumptions when we're actually talking about ethics here. Of course, there's also rules to follow in interactions, and our actions affect others. And that is a big one to remember, is how our actions affect others. So one thing the book doesn't jump into that I kind of like to cover here, and that is the difference between ethics and morals. So if we take a look, I've got an actual chart that's in your Blackboard here. And that is it's comparing and contrasting ethics and morals. So ethics, it's the rules of conduct recognized in respect to a particular class of human. Instead of reading all this, the way I like to break this down is ethics, you can think of it as it's a social system. Morals is an individual. So you can think of ethics as basically a group of people has decided these are the rules that we're going to go by. That is ethics. Versus morals is an individual belief. And so oftentimes things that are moral may not be ethical, and sometimes things that are ethical may not be moral. Sometimes they're both. But just keep in mind that they are different. Just because you think something is bad, oftentimes be careful, that could be like your moral compass. While ethics is more of like this group has decided this is what we are going to kind of the laws or the rules that we are going to follow. So that is what makes them ethical, is the fact that the group decided on those rules. An example of that is, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's this word omerta, and it is a code of silence that was developed by the mafia. So it was basically used to protect criminals from the police. So if you got caught doing something, then you should keep silent. You shouldn't rat out the others right here. And this is actually an ethical thing to do, because as a group, that an organization, that's what they decided their rule would be. So by keeping silent, they were being ethical, but they were not being moral, as morally that would be something that is wrong. All right, so in our coverage, we have several different ethical views. So it's deontological, utilitarianism, natural rights. We have negative rights, positive rights, golden rules, and contributing society. And we're going to briefly cover those here. So deontological theories. This is kind of the means do not justify the ends. So if you believe that lying is bad, then you can never lie. An example of this would be if somebody broke into your house and said, "Where's your mother? I'm about to shoot your mother." A deontological view would say, okay, I believe lying is bad and I cannot lie. So therefore, I would have to tell them where my mother is, knowing that they would shoot my mother. Utilitarianism is the opposite. It's the ends justify the means. So they want to create the highest utility for the group or the system there. So an example of that one, if you had 5 people, you had 1 healthy person and you had 4 sick people. And those 4 people were going to die unless they had an operation. So the utilitarian would say, okay, we need to basically harvest the organs out of the 1 healthy person and then give them to the 4 unhealthy people, knowing that the 1 healthy person would die, but the 4 sick people would live. That would give the most utility out of that. Then we have natural rights. So natural rights is what is, sorry, where was that here? Natural rights. That is life, liberty, property. So basically those are inherent and they are given to you. They must be protected. Sorry. Yes. Okay, sorry. Our water was out and it just came back on, and everybody busted in here and tried to tell me that. And now I've completely lost my train of thought. So I believe I was talking about natural rights. So natural rights, the focus is on the individual's rights to life, liberty, and property. An example of that would be is if your neighbor asks you to cut down a tree on your property and that blocks their view, but your natural right approach would be that you can keep that tree because it's your right to have that tree. You don't have to cut down that tree because it makes your neighbor unhappy there. We have negative rights, so those are liberty. So the right to act without interference here. So that would kind of be the freedom of speech, which allows you to say your opinions without the government interfering whatsoever. Positive rights, those are claim rights. So that is an obligation of some people to provide certain things for others. So it obligates you to provide things for other people there. So an example of that would be if you had a claim right to a job, then it would then maybe be the government's obligation to create jobs for you to work. The golden rule, this one can kind of be summed up with do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that's kind of a good rule right there. I mean, it's one that it's a little bit less black and white than some of the others. So if you had someone in a sports car with you that gets motion sickness, then you would need to consider that and not just drive, really, really fast and tight turns and everything through a bunch of curves and mountains and stuff. You would want to consider the fact that they get car sick and not do that. And the other one is contributing to society. This one's a good example, doing one's work honestly, responsible, ethically, creatively. Oftentimes that would be like, even if it was like if you was a programmer, if you wanted to, I guess, donate your skills, like some program to charity right there. So that would be contributing to society with your skills that you have. Then we have social contracts here. So I think it's pretty much what it says right here on this. People willingly submit to a common law in order to live in a civil society there. And lastly, the one we want to cover here is no simple answers. And this is going to hit home all throughout the semester right here. And the fact that we're going to look through all this stuff, and there's going to be some really, really hard questions, but ultimately there are no, one size fits all. So ethical theories do not provide clear, incontrovertible, correct positions on most issues. But we can use the approaches that we have described to support the opposite sides of many of these views. So, just keep in mind, no simple answers on a lot of the subjects that we're going to be talking about. And then, do organizations have ethics? The book argues, yes, they do have ethics. And we also know that individuals have ethics. So we kind of have to hold both of the individuals and the organizations responsible for their acts. And then lastly here, we have some things, kind of some distinctions that we need to keep in mind. And that is right, wrong, and okay. So I think the book kind of states that we shouldn't think so much this as right, wrong, and okay, but as ethically obligatory. So meaning this is what we need to be doing to be ethical, ethically prohibited. So we can't do that as an ethical person. And then ethically acceptable. So kind of like, okay, that's okay to do. And then on harm, harm is not the sole criteria to determine if something is unethical. There are things that cause harm that can be ethical. So a simple example of that would be like a doctor having to amputate a leg to save someone's life. So yes, they did do harm in that scenario. The person lost their leg, but they also saved their life by amputating that leg. And then separating goals from constraints, just realizing that we can't just do what we want, even though the goal might be good in the end, but there are constraints in society that might, prohibit us from doing that. And then personal preference and ethics. So that's kind of the thing we talked about earlier, morals versus ethics. Those are different. Sometimes they're one and the same. Sometimes they can be different. The same with laws and ethics. Just because something is a law does not make it ethical, and something that is ethical is not necessarily a law. All right, so that is all of our coverage today. It's a little bit shorter. I normally don't even hardly get through that, but the ability to not ask questions, it kind of changed some things up. So again, keep in mind that we're going to have that group day. So I will have you randomly assigned into groups for Thursday, or no, sorry, for Friday. So, and make sure you're on time, because we will be counting off points, because if we've already started and your group has already made their discussion, then you're not going to be able to get full credit for that. All right, so y'all have a good day, and I'll see you on Friday.